Was I wrong for what I did? Honestly, I still don't know the answer, even after everything that's happened. But let me tell you this. The feeling of having the floor drop out from under your entire life. The knowledge that everything you thought was real was just a beautifully constructed lie. That's a kind of emotional vertigo that completely breaks you. I'm talking about the day my family told me that at 30 years old, I was adopted. The very same day they divided their $50 million estate. The lakefront mansion, our family company, and 3 luxury cars among my real siblings. You were never really one of us, my mother said, and that single sentence, delivered with such cold finality, was the sound of my life shattering. The shock, the betrayal, the humiliation of realizing they waited until the literal last possible second to cut me out, it was all too much. I looked at the vast, polished mahogany table, at the stack of legal documents, at the smirks on the faces of my brother and sister, and I had to fight the urge to just scream until my lungs gave out. Tell me, right now, before I even start this story, would you have walked away with dignity, or would you have set the whole damn thing on fire? This story, the real story, begins not with the ending, but 30 years earlier, on a cold morning in late October. My parents, Arthur and Eleanor Vance, were the epitome of old money Arthur, a titan in regional manufacturing, and Eleanor, a society fixture whose charity galas made the front page of the local papers. They lived in the kind of wealth that was practically invisible, not flashy, but deep, comfortable, and spanning generations. I grew up in that lakefront mansion, the one now signed over exclusively to my brother James. It was a sprawling, stone and slate behemoth with meticulously manicured grounds, a private dock, and a library that smelled of aged leather and ambition. James was 5 years older, a smooth, calculating guy who took to the family business Vance Industries like a fish to water. My sister Clara was 2 years younger, effortlessly charming, blonde, and destined for a life of perpetual leisure funded by the family trust. And then there was me, Mark. I always felt like the third wheel, the quiet one, the one who didn't quite fit the mold, but I convinced myself it was just a personality difference, a classic middle child complex. I loved my parents deeply, or at least, the people I thought were my parents. They were strict but fair, supportive of my education, and they gave me every advantage money could buy. I went to the best schools, traveled the world, and was groomed to take a leadership position in Vance Industries, just like James. I was vice president of operations, running the day-to-day logistics, a job I genuinely excelled at and poured my entire adult life into. I believed with every fiber of my being that I was a Vance, a critical part of this powerful, complicated, and loving if slightly dysfunctional family unit. We had our squabbles, of course. James always found ways to subtly undermine me in board meetings, and Clara treated my accomplishments with polite indifference. But that's just sibling rivalry, right? That's what I told myself for years. The biggest sign I ignored was the way my father, Arthur, would avoid direct, one-on-one father-son talks with me. He'd mentor James for hours, but with me it was always business, transactional, never emotional. Eleanor, my mother, was even more distant. Her affection felt curated, practiced, never spontaneous. But again, I rationalized it as their old-fashioned, stiff upper lip style. They were Vances. The stage for the ultimate betrayal was set over the past year. Arthur's health had been deteriorating rapidly. A slow, cruel decline. It was heartbreaking to watch, and I spent countless nights at the hospital, coordinating his care, making sure the business didn't implode in his absence. I worked harder than I ever had, out of love, duty, and the firm expectation that my loyalty would be recognized and rewarded in the eventual estate division. Everyone knew the net worth, over $50 million in liquid assets, properties, and the company itself. The general assumption, which everyone had hinted at for years, was that the company would be split 50-50 between James and me, since we were the operational leaders, and the remaining assets and properties would be divided equally among the three of us, with Clara receiving a substantial trust. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Thompson, who'd been with the family for 40 years, was always present, preparing the final documents. Arthur passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 weeks ago, and the funeral was a massive affair, a testament to his legacy. My grief was real, profound, and consuming. I genuinely loved the man who raised me. The reading of the will was scheduled for last Tuesday, a formal, private event held in the mansion's library. I walked in feeling heavy with sorrow, ready to face the future of Vance Industries alongside my siblings. James, looking smug in a custom suit, was already seated. Clara, teary-eyed but clutching a ridiculously expensive handbag, sat beside him. I took the seat opposite them, ready for the business of mourning to conclude. Mr. Thompson, silver-haired and stoic, cleared his throat and began. He read Arthur's final wishes, the formal declarations of assets, and then he got to the division. The company, Vance Industries, 100% to James. The lakefront mansion, the separate property in the Hamptons, and the 3 luxury cars, 100% to James and Clara, jointly. The remaining liquid assets divided equally between James and Clara. My name, Mark Vance, was not mentioned. Not once. A cold wave washed over me. I thought there must be a mistake, a separate clause, a codicil. I interrupted Mr. Thompson, my voice a strained whisper. Mr. Thompson, I don't understand. Where is my part of? The estate? My portion of the company? The lawyer looked down at the documents, avoiding my eyes. It was Eleanor, my mother, who spoke. She hadn't said a word until then. Sitting at the head of the table, regal and terrifyingly calm. She pushed a single, sealed envelope across the table toward me. It's all in here, Mark. You need to read it, she said, her voice flat, devoid of the warmth she'd so expertly faked for 3 decades. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a single, official-looking document, not a will, but a certificate of adoption, my original birth certificate, with the names of a mother and father I had never heard of, and a separate, typewritten note from Arthur. The note was brief, clinical. Mark, at 30 years old, you are no longer a minor and are therefore not legally entitled to any of the Vance estate. The adoption was private, and since you were never a biological descendant, you were never truly a Vance. We provided for you while you were under our care. Consider the education and lifestyle your inheritance. You are to vacate the premises and resign from Vance Industries immediately. You were never really one of us. This is final. Arthur and Eleanor. The room spun. My ears were ringing. I looked up, tears blurring my vision, at Eleanor. Her face was a mask of indifference. Mother? What? What are you saying? I choked out. The truth, Mark, she said, sipping water. Your biological mother was a student who couldn't care for you. We took you in as a child because we couldn't conceive right away. James and Clara were born a few years later. You served a purpose for a time, but legally and genetically, you are not our son. You know how much your father valued the Vance name and lineage. He was clear, the fortune stays with the bloodline. You were a wonderful experiment, Mark, but the experiment is over. James actually snickered. Clara looked at her nails, completely unbothered. That moment, the raw, undiluted shock of seeing the people I loved transform into monsters right before my eyes, was the darkest moment of my life. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly on the hardwood, shaking from head to toe. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just nodded once, the lie of my life collapsing around me. I walked out of that mansion, out of the only home I'd ever known, with nothing but the clothes on my back and the shattered pieces of my identity. I resigned from Vance Industries via a cold email that afternoon, telling them to clear out my office. I was homeless, penniless in my own estimation, and fundamentally alone. The next few days were a blur of cheap motels and stale coffee. I spent hours staring at that adoption paper, the only proof of who I was and who I wasn't. The names on it meant nothing, a young woman named Sarah Jenkins and a father listed as unknown. The anger finally gave way to a cold, desperate resolve. I wasn't going to just crawl into a hole and die. I was a Vance in every way that mattered. I had their cunning, their drive, and their ruthless business sense, and I was going to use it against them. I needed to know who my real parents were. I needed an answer, a new identity, a reason why I was discarded like faulty inventory. I had about $15,000 in my personal savings account, the only money they couldn't touch. That was my war chest. I needed an investigator, but the high-end firms were out of my league. That's when I found him. A retired cop named Sal, operating out of a dingy office downtown, charging a flat $200 retainer for an initial consultation, with the promise of more if he found anything. He was old, sharp, and looked like he'd seen it all. I sat across his battered desk, slid the $200 across, and handed him the adoption paper, detailing the whole devastating story. Find Sarah Jenkins, I instructed him, and find unknown. That's all I need. Sal just nodded, took a long drag from his cigar, and said, "This is a cleanup job, kid, a real mess. Give me 2 weeks." I spent those 2 weeks torturing myself. I replayed every holiday, every family dinner, every whispered word of praise, trying to find the cracks in the facade I'd missed. I realized all the little slights, the feeling of not belonging, the subtle exclusion from certain private family stories. They weren't my imagination. They were clues I was too blind to see. My sister's coldness wasn't rivalry, it was genuine contempt for an outsider pretending to be one of them. James's need to constantly diminish me wasn't insecurity. It was a purebred protecting his territory. I felt like a zoo animal released into the wild, completely unprepared. It's hard to describe the depth of that emotional devastation. It's not just losing your parents, it's losing your entire history, your name, your past, and your guaranteed future. All at once. I was an orphan in a suit. So that's the situation I was in. Completely adrift, nursing the most profound wound a person can suffer, and gambling my last bit of hope on a $200 private investigator. I had poured 30 years into a family that turned out to be a legal fiction, and now I had to start over at square one, but with the added burden of knowing the people who raised me were capable of such calculated, ice-cold cruelty. My entire life had been a rehearsal for a role I was never actually cast in. Before I tell you what happened next, the call that changed everything, the climax that brought me face to face with the man who was meant to be my father, and the incredible, unbelievable revenge I ultimately got. I want you to pause right here. Take a second and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have focused all your energy on finding your biological family and forgotten the Vances? Or would you have dedicated your life to getting revenge on Arthur and Eleanor for their 30-year lie? Seriously, tell me your plan. 2 weeks and 1 day later, I was sitting in my sterile, temporary apartment when the phone rang. It was Sal. His voice, usually gravelly and laconic, was tight, a little shaky, and absolutely dripping with stunned disbelief. "Mark," he said, not waiting for a greeting. "You need to sit down. I've got your answer. I found Sarah Jenkins, and I know who the father is. And kid, you are not going to believe this. I've done 40 years of detective work, and this is the wildest thing I've ever seen." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear him. "What is it, Sal? Tell me. Who is he?" I demanded. Sal paused for dramatic effect, then delivered the line that vaporized my past and rewrote my future. "Mark, your biological father is Robert Harrington ***. He is the founder and CEO of Harrington Global ***, the biggest competitor to Vance Industries. He's worth about $5 billion dollars. The name hit me like a physical blow. Robert Harrington. The name he said made me speechless. Harrington Global wasn't just Vance Industries' competitor. They were the absolute Goliath, the multinational conglomerate that Arthur Vance spent his entire life trying to catch up to. Arthur times hated times Robert Harrington with a passion that bordered on mania, publicly dismissing him as a lucky upstart while secretly fearing his every move. And now, this man, this billionaire titan, this rival, was my time's father ***. I hung up the phone eventually, the revelation short-circuiting my brain. The Vances had adopted the son of their arch-nemesis, raised him, groomed him to run their company, and then callously discarded him. The cosmic irony was a masterpiece. Sal had all the details. Sarah Jenkins, my biological mother, had been a young, ambitious intern at Harrington Global when she had a brief, secret affair with Robert Harrington. She got pregnant, and Harrington, already married with 2 small children, paid her a massive sum of money for her silence and for the child to be given up for private adoption, ensuring no link back to him. The Vances, desperate for a child and with connections in the private adoption market, unknowingly snatched up the son of their greatest rival. It was a secret kept buried by a massive NDA and a huge payout until now. My mother, Sarah, had kept a meticulously detailed journal, chronicling her emotional turmoil, and she had never cashed the final, largest check, keeping it tucked away with the journal, as a form of painful proof. She had since moved on and had a new, happy life, but the existence of me, her first son, was an open wound. Sal had tracked her down first, and she, shocked but ready to confess, told him the whole story and pointed him toward Robert Harrington. I met Robert Harrington a few days later. It wasn't a tearful reunion. It was a formal, sterile meeting in the penthouse suite of the Harrington Global headquarters. He was exactly as I'd seen him in the financial magazines. Sharp, intimidating, with eyes that assessed and calculated everything. He wasn't sentimental, but he was ***, a man of action ***. I walked in, laid the adoption certificate, Sarah's affidavit, and the uncashed check on his glass table, and watched his face drain of color. He confessed everything, without hesitation. He never knew where I ended up. He just knew I was adopted out. He looked at me, at my eyes, my posture, the way I carried myself, which was apparently all him, and the connection was immediate, if not emotional. He saw a mirror of his own ambition. I was blind, focused only on my career. He admitted, "I made a terrible mistake, Mark. I abandoned you." I told him about the Vances, their lie, the estate division, and the "you were never one of us"'s speech. And that's when Robert Harrington, the $5 billion CEO, looked at me, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of paternal guilt and pure, unadulterated, business rivalry. "They raised you to run their company, only to discard you in the end," he murmured. "They tried to turn my son into a Vance. We can't let that stand, Mark. We will not let that stand. He didn't offer me money. He didn't offer me a trust fund. He offered me ***, power ***. You have the business acumen, you have the operational knowledge of Vance Industries, and you have my resources. Come work for me, Mark, not as my son, but as my new vice president. You are a Harrington, and we are going to make Vance Industries irrelevant." The transformation was swift and exhilarating. I stepped into Harrington Global not as an adopted son, but as a long-lost heir and executive talent immediately put to work. My job was simple: use my intimate 30-year knowledge of Vance Industries' inner workings, their supply chain vulnerabilities, their major contracts, their internal politics, everything to systematically dismantle them. Robert gave me an unprecedented level of control and the full weight of his resources. The irony was intoxicating. The Vances had groomed me for 30 years, teaching me all their secrets, only to hand that devastating insider knowledge directly to their biggest enemy. They had created the perfect weapon against themselves. The climax was less a confrontation and more a slow, surgical strangulation. I targeted Vance Industries' biggest, most lucrative contracts. I knew precisely which supplier was unreliable, which contract was coming up for renewal, and what price point they needed to stay competitive. Robert and I undercut them, offering better terms, faster delivery, and superior quality, all financed by Harrington Global's bottomless war chest. James, now the CEO, was completely blindsided. He couldn't understand how they were losing contract after contract to Harrington Global, often by margins so thin it defied logic. I was using my knowledge of his operational cost models against him. I knew which of their employees were talented but underpaid and disgruntled, and I recruited them aggressively, peeling away their best people one by one. I even managed to acquire the small, specialty manufacturing plant that supplied Vance Industries with a critical, custom component, a move that completely paralyzed their main production line for 6 weeks. James tried to fight back. launching aggressive ad campaigns and demanding emergency loans, but his attempts were clumsy and desperate. He was playing chess. I was using a supercomputer. The final blow came 6 months later. Vance Industries, hemorrhaging money and losing major market share, was finally on its knees, unable to service its debt. The banks were calling in their loans, and James, frantic, had to put the entire company up for sale. Robert Harrington, through a shell company I meticulously created, swooped in. We bought Vance Industries for a fraction of its former value, the final, humiliating acquisition. James and Clara were left with a crumbling mansion, a worthless company, and a fraction of the original $50 million. That was quickly eaten up by legal fees and poor investment decisions James had made in his panic. The satisfying conclusion came during the final board meeting, the formal handover. I walked into the old Vance boardroom, not as Mark Vance, VP of Operations, but as Mark Harrington, the new owner. James was there, looking pale and defeated. Eleanor was there, maintaining her rigid composure, though her eyes betrayed her shock. I sat at the head of the table. "You look surprised, Mother," I said, using the title I had once cherished, now just a cutting tool. "You said I was never really one of you." "You're right. I'm not. I'm a Harrington. You tried to cut me out, but what you really did was free me and give me the intimate knowledge necessary to take everything you held dear. Consider the downfall of Vance Industries my final inheritance, the one you never saw coming." I looked straight at James. "I know how the entire system works, James. You taught me well. Thank you." I gave him a sincere, terrifying smile. I gave James a small, non-executive role out of a strange sense of irony. He had to work for the new company owned by his biological father's rival's son, just to keep a small income. Clara had to sell her luxury cars. Eleanor lost her beloved lakefront mansion, which Robert decided to turn into a corporate retreat center, a public sign of Harrington Global's dominance. I never wanted their money or their lifestyle back. I wanted them to realize the staggering cost of their heartlessness. I got my answer, and it was a $50 million estate and a family company. It was a hell of a ride, a betrayal that led to a revelation that led to a righteous, corporate-level revenge. I have my real father, a powerful man who is trying to make amends. I have my real identity, and I have a career that is built on true merit, not a lie. The Vances are a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and cruelty. They thought they could discard people like broken toys. They were wrong. Like this video if you were on my side in this whole crazy mess. Subscribe for more stories like this, because trust me, the corporate world is full of people who deserve a little payback. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Tell me if Arthur got what he deserved. I'll see you all in the next story.